Well, and further afield, millions of Americans are heading to the polls in one of the world's most anticipated elections. So after months of fierce campaigning, Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump are hoping that they've done enough to clinch victory. They are currently neck and neck both nationally in most of the swing states. The president is not elected directly by the popular vote, but by the Electoral College. Under this system, voters' ballots elect over 500 members of the Electoral College, which then elects the president and a vice president. To win, a candidate needs 270 Electoral College votes. These electors are expected to meet on December the 17th to formally vote for the president as well as the vice president. Well, let's now take you live to Washington, D.C., where Newzroom Afrika's Ngcobo is for us and, of course, is covering these elections. I have to stress this very important part that it is 11:15 in Washington, D.C., and that's the reason why I'm dressed out like this in South Africa, where it's 6:15, and Ngcobo is dressed up the way that he currently is dressed up in. But I can only imagine, Ngcobo, about the excitement heading into these elections. But it was also a fierce battle, considering, for instance, on one end, you had Donald Trump, who is a convicted felon, a former president of the USA. At some point, the belief was that the Republicans won't vote him back into becoming the presidential candidate. On the other hand, it was going to be a Donald Trump versus Biden until Biden had to drop out because some people complaining about his age, 81 years. And now it is Kamala Harris. What can you tell us about their campaigns? And yesterday I saw that the final push was in Pennsylvania.
Indeed, Aldrin, and good morning to you. Well, it is evening my time. I'm about to doze off, so immediately after my chat to you, I'm going to get a few hours of sleep, and then we're back at it again. But as you correctly point out, it is the final stretch. In fact, just as you were probably preparing to come on air at about 4 a.m. this morning, Aldrin, it was 9 p.m. this side, and both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump were campaigning in exactly the same state, but different vicinities. It's Pennsylvania, and they were both in Pittsburgh. And so very interesting indeed. And after that, the understanding is that they are going to jet off to yet more states. And so you can imagine just how desperate this is becoming. And again, the sentiment on the ground is that it is too close to call, and so none of the candidates can claim victory. But I want to take you back to a point you made, Aldrin, about Kamala Harris coming in to this race a little late in the day. Remember, he joined 10 weeks before Election Day, which will be tomorrow, and this is after Joe Biden was placed under pressure by the Democratic powerful interests, whether you talk about those that fund the party and people, or should I say families like the Clintons and the Obamas. And so they placed pressure on him purely because, first of all, he performed poorly in that June televised debate between himself and Donald Trump. And two, there were very strong fears about his state of health, given that he also is of an advanced stage. And so that's when Kamala Harris eventually joined the campaign. But credit to her, she has put a very, very solid campaign trying to challenge Donald Trump. And so today, well, as we wake up tomorrow morning, we are going to find out exactly how Americans have received these two, particularly the messaging, which has been quite volatile at times.
Yeah, and looking at some of the analysis that are coming out of the early votes, over 70 million votes that have been cast in the early votes, is seeing that how you have more women that have come out to cast their ballots. I see Elon Musk is now also called on men to go out and vote, because the assumption is that more men would be voting for a Donald Trump. Tell us about some of that dynamics as some of the pollsters look at what the possibilities are once the Electoral College Committee meets to make that final decision around who's going to be the next president and vice president of the United States.
So, Aldrin, two issues stand out at least for me, just the last few days I've been here, whether I am listening to opinion makers on the streets and particularly where we are broadcasting from, we have a big crowd of journalists, international journalists who invite opinion makers. And when it comes to the question of abortion, women are feeling very threatened by the prospect that their constitutional rights could be trampled upon in this way. And what is important here, Alden, to understand is that women in the early stages of pregnancy, some of them are not even aware that they are pregnant, but we are told that within 12 weeks of pregnancy, if they do not go and terminate, they are not allowed to do that, particularly in certain states, and that is going to be punishable by law. And that is something that has struck fear into the female voters. And that's why, in a sense, you're hearing that it is almost a campaign between men and women gravitating towards Kamala Harris, while men, on the other hand, motivated perhaps by the zeal to feed their families, the state of the economy. Groceries are very expensive, and I can attest to that, having been here just a few days. It's very expensive just to buy coffee and a biscuit from a coffee shop. I was shocked. I landed at the airport, Alden, and it cost me $300 just to buy a cup of coffee and a slice of cake. So that tells you just how expensive things have become, which talks again to the point back home about the cost of living crisis. So all of these factors included, this is what, at least in some instances, is a big motivator. Yes, Donald Trump has also campaigned on immigration issues, but the feeling is that it's not really gotten the traction that he would have wanted, because this was one issue that he stood on back in 2020, and that was almost the core message of his campaign. This time around, it does appear that, particularly towards the end, I was listening on television just a few hours ago to Bernie Sanders, one of the most respected politicians in America, but he's always stood as an independent in previous elections. He says, just as you started this conversation, that Donald Trump is a convicted felon, both for fraud and sexual misconduct. On the other hand, you have Kamala Harris, who almost stands out as being clean of any scandal. However, her ties to Joe Biden and how, particularly on foreign policy, they have handled the Middle East crisis is something that they possibly are going to pay a price for. And Bernie Sanders saying in his last few words that if the Democrats lose this election, they have to ask themselves some very, very deep questions, because for him, this election should not be a neck and neck as we are seeing right now. And so he's pointing to something that could be very wrong in the Democratic camp.
Yeah, and of course, in Georgia, Kamala Harris did say that she wants to see an end to the war in Gaza. We're going to explore that aspect a bit further on, a bit later on here on the show with Professor Christopher Sike from the University of Pretoria. Thank you so much. Xoli is going to go now and catch a bit of a sleep, squeeze in a few hours before the big day unfolds in the United States of America. With that said, at the same time, Donald Trump's running mate, JD Vance, has told a rally in Atlanta that if elected to the White House, Republicans will order undocumented migrants to pack their bags and go home. Newzroom Afrika Ziyanda Ngcobo is in Georgia, where Vance addressed a large crowd of supporters.
The vice presidential candidate for the Republicans here in Cobb County, Atlanta. The messaging quite the same all around. Illegal aliens must go, they must pack their bags, but Kamala Harris has failed in her 3.5 years in the White House, and in less than 24 hours, I should say, she should pack her bags and leave. Let's bring in someone who attended the rally. His name is Stanley.
Yes.
You're African American, you're here at a Republican rally, but you know, why are you here? What resonates with JD Vance for you and Donald Trump?
The whole campaign is dwelled into God, and that's what the others miss out. They don't want to bring God and country together, and that's what kind of resonates with me with Trump. I went to a Trump rally in Vegas as well, so.
Some would say, but where's God in wanting to chuck people out of the country? I mean, JD Vance was saying, you know, you call us fascists, you call us racist for wanting secure borders, you call us garbage, you know. Kamala does not love her citizens as much as we do. Do you believe that?
First and foremost, she's a prosecutor, and as black men in this country, we've been prosecuted time and time ever again. Trump brought in the second step out to give African American people a chance again to right a wrong, and she's not for that. She's more of the same. Half of the judicial system that Obama put in prosecutes black men on a regular basis, and it's just very hard to stand by that. You know, the judges systems and the judicial system is not for us here, and at least with Trump, we know we have a chance. He gave us a second chance to right the wrong, and that's not the case in that factor. That's not the case.
All right, Stanley, thank you so much for your time. Stanley there, he's one of the attendees at the JD Vance rally here in Cobb County, Atlanta. And it's just a few hours to go before America decides, but certainly, as you can see, Stanley, an African-American man, making his voice heard, and the views very diverse from what we've seen across the spectrum. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo in Atlanta in the USA.